Welcome everyone to Hearts of Iron 4, back into the game. We're going to be playing Upper Malay Deluge today, as you can probably already see from the background and the countries, and we're going to be playing as Great Britain, because I think it's a pretty interesting country in this mod. Now, obviously Sunflower Patch has hit. There is a whole lot of things that you can do with the difficulty settings. Unfortunately, the game crashes when I actually click one of these. I'm not sure as to why. It's not the fault of the mod. As you can see, there is already some pretty interesting sort of integrated content. They've integrated the system, well, he, because the modder is one, has integrated the system pretty well into the mod from the Sunflower Patch, but unfortunately I cannot really use it. I won't really do any of these because there won't be any point to them. Now, Great Britain in this mod is obviously a little bit weaker from this normal game. They've got a lot less colonies, they've lost the Great War against France, and they have a pretty weird political situation you will see when we get into the game. As right now we are going to have a few divisions set up, actually a decent amount of garrisons, but not really as many as we'd like. We're going to build more garrisons. We only got 4. But we're going to build more because we've got a lot of, obviously, ports to defend. And then we've got a pretty good amount of regular troops, which we're going to put under the command of, probably Montgomery. And then we're going to just have a couple of areas where I'm going to put them, just so that it's easier for me to access them. We've also got a pretty huge amount of things all over the world, aka navies. We've still got a few little colonies. We've got Malta, we have got on the far east British India, who has our puppet, and then Singapore. Also obviously a pretty good amount of rubber coming in from there, which is obviously very nice. And then Hong Kong and Nantong. So a couple of places in China are our dependencies, and then we've got Australia and New Zealand being a little bit more tightly controlled than normal. They are definitely going to be important in our campaign. We've also got South Africa on board. We don't have anything in Canada though. We've got Newfoundland, looks like, but that's about it as far as colonies go. We've got Quebec being an independent republic, and a couple of extra things that aren't in the normal game. Obviously the Algonquin Republic, and then Alaska being part of Russia still, but we will deal with that when the time comes. For I intend to play a pretty aggressive game. Now let's set up a research. In terms of Britain, we are pretty well off in that we've got just standard electronic mechanical engineering from the get-go, and also radios from the get-go, so we are actually in a fairly good spot to not have that much time spent on the engineering tree. We do need to research some machine tools though, because that's going to be very obviously important. And then we can research probably the Hurricane, and I don't think we need any navies right now. Any navy stuff, possibly the Matilda tank, which is a light tank in this game. And yeah, essentially because we've got a pretty good industry from the start, we don't exactly need to spend all that much time building up, and we can get into building actual units fairly quickly, so it's good for us to get those unit techs as much as possible. Now I'm gonna queue up for mostly civilian factories at the start and then diversify later on. In terms of military factories, we've got 12 from the start, so that's a pretty decent amount. I'm gonna invest a few more into infantry equipment right now. I'm not sure as to, we need some artillery, we need some motorized, definitely. So we're gonna put motorized at the most highest priority, but then, okay. So we've got everything we need, it looks like. We don't need anything more. Well, we're gonna need some carrier fighters and carrier naval bombers, but that's not gonna be an urgent deal. We're gonna have some fleet stuff set up. Sorry, I could be skipping this, but there's no real point because it's gonna get important pretty quickly, the things that are gonna be happening. And then, yeah, okay. So then we're gonna have infantry equipment be our main priority for now, at least, just to get a lot of stuff out as quickly as possible. But then we're gonna have some good priority on artillery, motorized, support, tanks, even though tanks are gonna be a bit later, and then especially aircraft, because yeah, aircraft are pretty important when you are an island. So let's actually just get the clock going after the national focuses are set. Obviously there's a lot more national focuses in this mod. These are all generic, but they do some nice stuff. There are some actual unique focuses for England, for example, taking Portuguese, Africa, and Ireland, getting some claims. So that's that, and then all these are pretty basic for everyone. We've also got a couple of diplomatic focuses, but those are pretty much about it in terms of the unique national focuses for Britain. We're gonna need to trade for some oil, and then yeah, that's just normal. We don't have a lot of manpower because we've got the Great War Horrors national flag, so obviously we have a lot less recruitable population until we can get this national focus, national unity, which is going to remove the Great War Horrors and give us a lot more manpower. Our other national spirit is the Fighting King, Edward VIII. As you can see, he is our leader. In this timeline, he is a bit of a a little bit more of a popular king, and obviously he gives you monarchist and ultra-nationalist drift, unless I believe you remove the monarchy, which is what you do if you're going a radical playthrough. Radicals in this mod are the sort of replacement for communists, and they're pretty strong in Germany. There's a civil war in Germany at the beginning, and then they've also got a few countries in the east, for example Ukraine, the Baltic states, and the Caucasian Democratic Republic, and also the Socialist Republic of Quebec. Those are all the radical countries. Then the other ideologies are monarchist, which is what we are right now, and also what is Spain and I believe France. Yep, got the Bonaparte party. Then there is ultranationalist, aka fascist, which is Italy, as you can see. And then there is democratic. Now, can I find democratic? Yes, the Netherlands. In the beginning, there's a civil war in Germany between ultranationalists, monarchists, and radicals. So that's pretty much it on the explanation. Let's actually start the game. It starts on May Day, so it's a little bit, there's a few less months at the start compared to normal Hearts of Iron. And this is what I was talking about, the Dominions in the Commonwealth. The Dominions are the self-governing British colonies. This movement towards partial sovereignty has taken 100 years, and it was about to take a new step towards the introduction of the Commonwealth system. Regrettably, with the passing of the Commonwealth, by the way, is our faction, in case you did not know. With the passing of King George V in January, may God rest his soul, oh god, the project was halted. Now Edward VIII has been formally inaugurated. It can proceed with his royal assent, of course, which we aren't going to give. The Parliament is eager to see the king continue the trend towards constitutionalism, although elements of the armed forces are trying to frustrate this process. So we have three options: status quo, which is just staying monarchist as much as possible, and of course all these things actually affect our dominions, so yeah, it's pretty important to be wary of that. Also, getting the democratic option, responsible government, is a worthy goal. We'll change our voting laws, which I will explain later. And then we can have the empire cannot afford sentimentality, which is what we're going to take. And, oh look, Commonwealth reforms reversed, and we have a cabinet under Sir Arthur Harris, one of the most interesting characters of World War II, I believe. And as you can see, our Empire Party has a 45% support among the population, but unfortunately we've got a little bit of a problem. We've got propertied vote, and propertied vote is one of the new mechanisms in terms of laws and policies that was added in this mod. Voting franchise. Universal suffrage is what radicals do, a dangerous idea as the description says, which increases your radical drift and your national unity. Then propertied vote is essentially what sort of was pretty in vogue in Europe in like the 1800s, is only people with a certain amount of tax revenue can vote, certain amount of if they pay a certain amount of taxes, then you can vote. So essentially only sort of rich people can vote. and that's pretty obviously favoring towards monarchist, because the people who are gonna vote are gonna be a little bit more conservative. Then limited suffrage is a little bit of a in between universal and propertied. It's essentially just minorities and women and all the likes cannot vote, which is kind of what a lot of European countries had at about this time period of history in our timeline. And that's obviously pretty good for democratic, because the demographics line up to a more democratic thing. And the other bonuses are a little bit of a mix between the national unity of the suffrage and the political power of the landed vote. So it's a bit of a halfway. What we want is no voting. We don't want voting because, yeah, fuck that. We are the Empire Party. We're not going to have that nonsense. And that's going to increase our ultra-nationalist drift. Unfortunately, we cannot do that, because you can only change voting laws into no voting if you don't have elections. aka you cannot do it with political power. What we're going to be wanting to do is win a couple of elections, which is going to be pretty easy because our corporatism national focus over here is going to increase our drift towards ultranationalist, thus sort of evening out the drift of monarchist and keeping our majority. Eventually, we're going to reach enough of a majority that in a election vote, we're going to have a crushing majority, and then we're going to be able to outlaw voting, which is one of the political events that can happen in this mod. We've got a couple of other laws that were not in the standard game. We've got the gold standard, aka the monetary policy. You can have inflationary printing, which increases your factory output, essentially just pumping money into the economy. Floating exchange, which is a bit of a halfway. There's sort of a lot more focus on the market and the likes, and just trying to keep a sort of equally valued currency, and that's pretty good from construction speed. And then gold standard is just a fixed value currency, political power. And then fixed exchange, I'm not sure what fixed exchange is. Currency cannot be exchanged for gold, but the value is pegged to it. Okay, so it's like a gold standard, except it's a standard to another currency. Okay, and that increases your trade deal opinion factor, obviously, because you're... yeah, okay. That's not good. That one's not really good. We right now really like the political power, but then eventually we're going to want to transition into probably factory output with inflationary printing. Then we have the sort of social order, which is essentially how we are acting towards our population. We can be a welfare state, we can have robber barons, labor camps, or established religion. Established religion, essentially, we have a state religion, and we are very much sort of trying to keep the social order in accordance to that religion. So that's going to be less consumer factories and more political power, because we sort of are keeping traditions, and we have a little bit more leeway that way. Then labor camps, obviously resource gain efficiency. We just send people we don't like to labor camps, which could actually be really amazing because we're the United Kingdom and we've got some pretty nasty resource gain down here. So we could do that. Robber barons increases your construction speed, so it's pretty good at the beginning. Obviously, the state being a lot more favorable to sort of big corporations, big firms, and having a lot of education. No, that's not a word. Having a lot of allowances and subsidizing big factories and the likes. And then welfare state is essentially just spending the extra wealth on keeping people sort of on a decent living standard, just to have them not complain. Essentially, we get a more ideology-driven defense from that, and more national unity, because obviously it sort of increases people's loyalty towards the state. Wow, that was a mouthful. We've got 3 more cabinet ministry positions than the normal game, and this is also where there's another pretty interesting change compared to the standard game. You can have 2 types of sort of statesmen that can increase your drift in some way. You can have your regular guy, for example, over here, Communist Revolutionary, which gives you 0.10 towards the drift. And you can have a sort of halfway between a minister and a politician. So he gives 0.5 the 0.5, so half of that of the normal politician. But then it also gives you another bonus, which is pretty interesting because it allows you to have a little bit more customization with that. So, for example, later on, sorry, I'm pouring water, you may actually be able to hear it. Later on, you may be able to worry a little bit less about how your party is doing, and then just have, for example, oh, I really like production efficiency growth, so I'm gonna take a innovative capitalist, even though I am trying to be ultranationalist. That's gonna give me a little bit of liberal party drift, but in the end, we're not gonna really turn into it because we've already got other bonuses to work against that, and so I like my production efficiency growth, and so I'm gonna take it. Especially with the extra slots, that is very, very nice to have. Obviously, the ultranationalist guy is the Great War hero, which gives us core attack, and well, yeah, division attack on core territory. So not exactly the most useful, but pretty decent if you're gonna be invaded by someone. The normal laws are the same, so the export, volunteer stuff. And then we have a pretty standard sort of level of customization on the normal advisors and companies. Unfortunately, because obviously the mod has to have sort of sometimes generic advisors for certain countries, it's not as detailed as, for example, some of the flavor mods out there for the normal game, because obviously the countries are different. But there's still a pretty good amount of variety and flavor for Great Britain being one of the majors. So we're gonna get some division training going, and just in case you haven't seen in the event to actually sort of stop the empire reforms, we have a chance of people actually trying to break away. But it doesn't look like anyone tried to break away. We gained the puppet ship. Yeah, I'm just gonna call it the puppet ship of everyone. Essentially, what we were doing is trying to consolidate our control on the dominions, and so having done that, and they did not in any way try to oppose us. So yeah, we've got okay. So yeah, we've got essentially their allegiance for life. So we're gonna get the forces in other countries, or yeah, pretty much the overseas forces into their own army, just to have a little bit of a pretty clear picture of what we've got where. And I'm gonna just right now basically stop the recording until we've got something interesting to see, because there's gonna be a lot of setting up to do right now. So I'm gonna see that.